Winston Churchill, hero, statesman, warrior, orator. Few individuals in history carry a legacy as divisive and powerful as this man. He was a war leader of immense stature, a champion of democracy in its darkest hours, but also a figure mired in controversy, questionable decisions, and unapologetic imperialism. Churchill's life reads like an epic novel, packed with triumphs, tragedies, and a stubborn determination that shaped a generation and beyond. Born into privilege in 1874, Churchill's destiny seemed preordained. His father, Lord Randolph Churchill, was a prominent British politician, and his mother, Jenny Jerome, an American socialite, gave Winston access to power circles few could dream of. However, his childhood was far from idyllic. Churchill struggled academically and faced rejection from his distant parents. His drive for approval would haunt him for much of his life. But even if his early failures threatened to sideline him, Churchill's resilience was already in motion. As a young man, Churchill built his reputation as a soldier and journalist, travelling the globe in search of adventure. From the cavalry charge at Omdurman to his dramatic escape from a Boer prisoner of war camp, Churchill's early years were filled with daredevil exploits that painted him as a larger-than-life figure. His ambition knew no bounds. Even as his career as a writer flourished, the stage he truly coveted was politics. The ascent was far from smooth. Churchill's early years as a Member of Parliament saw frequent party switches and alienation of colleagues due to his brash personality. Yet, his speeches showcased an incredible talent for words, a foreshadowing of the power he would wield when Britain found itself on the precipice during World War II. By the time Europe plunged into the Great War, Churchill was already a seasoned political operative. As First Lord of the Admiralty, he spearheaded the modernisation of Britain's navy. But his gamble on the ill-fated Dardanelles campaign ended in catastrophe. Over 100,000 Allied troops perished, leading to his resignation and public disgrace. It could have destroyed him, yet somehow Churchill survived, clawing his way back into public life over the ensuing years. Redemption seemed distant, but Churchill held on to one belief, that failure was not permanent. Fast forward to the mid-1930s, and Churchill stood as one of the few voices warning of Adolf Hitler's intentions. The world, weary from the horrors of World War I, dismissed his pleas for rearmament as alarmist. But Churchill's instinct proved correct. In 1939, global war erupted once again. And by 1940, Churchill found himself at the helm as Britain's Prime Minister. His long-awaited moment had arrived. This was Churchill's apex. The indomitable force behind Britain's wartime resolve, he became a global symbol of resistance as Europe crumbled under Nazi domination. His fiery rhetoric stirred a frightened nation. "We shall fight on the beaches. We shall never surrender." Almost overnight, he transformed into a wartime icon, an embodiment of Britain's bulldog spirit. He tirelessly worked to solidify alliances, notably appealing to Franklin Roosevelt for desperately needed American support. Victory, Churchill believed, was inevitable, not because it was easy, but because defeat was unfathomable. But Churchill was more than a wartime leader. The decisions he made reverberated far beyond Britain's shores. His vision ensured the survival of Western democracy, yet his actions in colonies such as India painted another story. Churchill opposed Indian independence with vigour, even during the Bengal famine of 1943, a catastrophe that killed millions. Historians debate whether Churchill's indifference exacerbated the crisis, and it remains one of the darkest stains on his legacy. Similarly, his views on race and empire reflected a mindset rooted in Victorian-era ideas, values that felt increasingly outdated as the 20th century marched on. The post-war years marked Churchill's fall from grace. Having led his country to victory, he was defeated in the 1945 general election. It was a shocking blow. Churchill, the war hero, was no match for voters desperate for the promise of social reform. Nonetheless, far from conceding defeat, he returned to office in 1951 for one last chapter as Prime Minister, though age had worn on him. As Britain transitioned from empire to post-war recovery, Churchill's antiquated worldview began clashing with the realities of his own era. By the time of Churchill's death in 1965, the man was already a legend. Today, his legacy remains fiercely debated. Was Churchill the saviour Europe needed, or was he an imperialist whose policies caused harm to millions? The truth, perhaps, lies somewhere in between. What is undeniable is his sheer presence, the force of will that defined his life's journey. Churchill understood that greatness came not merely from achievement, but from daring. He was flawed, fiercely human, and singularly determined. Few historical figures can spark as much admiration and controversy as Winston Churchill, a man who towered over his era, casting shadows we still reckon with today.